Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Gaston Malloy. He is a lover of music, a musician himself, and so many things involved with music and kids and musical instruments. The first thing I'll do is welcome to the show because it's his first time on the show. Gaston, welcome.
Thank you.
Sort of a synopsis of who you are and what you do as far as life and music in general, because it's a fascinating story.
Well, I basically started playing in the 6th grade. I had this band director who came in and lined up all of us students one day and asked us about what we'd like to play, and I wanted to play trumpet. Well, by the time he got to me, he had run out of trumpets, so I ended up on that one instrument he had left, which is a trombone.
Which is much bigger, right?
It's much bigger and awkward for someone like myself at that age. And basically that got me started.
Yeah, with the trombone.
With the trombone, yeah.
Now, you know, I would say like the typical kid, especially if he starts with a big instrument like that, will, you know, probably put his time in, but, you know, his interest in it, you'd say, would run its course, and then maybe he'd want to move on to something else or just lose interest in it, as a lot of kids do. But in your case, that wasn't the case at all. It was just the opposite, right?
No, I fell in love with the trombone. We had some famous jazz artists back in those days that I listened to, and I wanted to be like them, even as a kid.
No kidding.
Yeah,
huh?
Even as a kid. Well, where I come from in North Carolina, and keep in mind I'm not 20 years old, we were still listening to jazz, bebop, and swing. So we weren't listening to as much, even though rock and roll was out. That music, the jazz and the bebop and swing, was still big.
Did they have like juke joints, like in the back in the woods and stuff like that? No kidding,
yeah,
huh?
Yeah, right at the corner of the cotton field.
No, really? Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. That's amazing. Because you kind of see that in the movies, but it existed. It's real life.
It absolutely exists in the South.
Yeah, yeah. Even to this day.
Not as much. I don't think you see much of that because many of the things that we used to do back in those days, which had to do with picking cotton and peaches and pears and doing a lot of that farm labor, doesn't exist anymore.
And where you're at, the big Tobacco Road area too.
Yeah. Huge. Families used to go away for 2 and 3 weeks at a time during the summer to make the money for their fall clothing for school and everything. Those are the things that went on when I was growing up. Yeah.
So I want to continue on the timeline. Mm-hmm. So you're a kid. You got assigned the trombone because that was the only instrument that was available. You played it. You loved it. At that time, even as you were getting a little bit older, you were listening to jazz and swing. Okay, so you're getting a little bit older now. So now what happens?
Well, I eventually start to perform. I'm in a little school jazz band. From that point, I ended up going into the Navy. From that point, and again, I played also when I was in the Navy.
I was going to say, you can be in the band in the Navy, right? Yeah.
So my ship had a band, so I performed in the Navy.
What was your instrument?
Trombone.
Okay, so you stayed with that.
Still with trombone.
At any point during this time, from when you first got that trombone to the point that you're in the Navy now, did you ever experiment or try other instruments? Did you like other instruments? Did you learn how to play them at all?
I always wanted to play other instruments. But the neighborhood that I lived in didn't have that many resources available for us young kids. So even though I wanted to play baritone, horn, tubas, and everything else, the only instrument I had available to me was that one trombone, which is probably one of the reasons why I own as many instruments as I do now.
And how many is that, by the way?
I have to say probably well over 100 or more.
No kidding, yeah. Wow.
I have a room full.
All playable?
All playable.
Now, you know what, the interesting thing that you just said there about how you wanted to do other stuff besides the trombone, you stayed in the realm of brass. Mm-hmm. I noticed you didn't mention guitar, keyboards, drum, anything like that. You stayed in the horns, in the brass section.
But I do play bass.
You do?
I do play guitar.
But see, that was later on.
Yeah.
You see, now when you were telling me how you kind of wanted to play other instruments, it was still in the brass section,
all
right?
the time.
Yeah?
I wanted to be a very good trombone player at the time. I didn't realize until later, though, that I could have been even better had I had a private teacher, which I did not have when I was in.
And I would imagine that also had to do with the limited resources that were available.
Yeah, absolutely.
And okay, so you're going along, you're playing the trombone, you actually got, you know, would you describe it as sort of starting your, I know you played in the school band and you were in the Navy in their band, but did you get to a point where you and some fellows got your own band going?
We put a little band together. We used to play around our little neighborhood in North Carolina there. We had about 4 or 5 guys playing the Marvin Gaye and all that other type music. But once I got out of that and got into the Navy, because it was one of those things where the Navy offered me the opportunity to do a lot more. I could be exposed to a lot more things. So from the Navy, once I got out of the Navy, I ended up getting into school at Rhode Island College. That is when I started becoming familiar with orchestral work, concert bands, and all those types of things.
Did the Navy help you pay for your education so you were able to go to Rhode Island College?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So that was advantageous.
Absolutely.
Did you ever have to play Hail to the Chief or anything? Did you learn how to play that in the Navy?
You have to.
You have to.
You always
yeah.
do those
yeah.
things. Yeah.
Now, the Navy style of music and stuff, it's different than maybe what your own personal tastes in music were growing up a little bit, right? But at the same time, maybe it's sort of exposed you to newer, different kinds of music that maybe you didn't listen to when you were younger?
I'm not sure if that's totally the case. I mean, you hear things on the radio anyway, and especially when it comes to patriotic music, you're going to hear certain things.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that it was vastly different. It's just that my actual playing was different, and it was somewhat limited to popular music at the time, or if we had to do Star Spangled Banner, or taps, or various things like that. You know, it was just a mixture.
Did you ever go to like Navy football and play at games or anything like that?
No, we weren't that heavy. No.
Right, yeah.
We weren't that heavy.
So you were talking about all the advantages that the Navy offered, and like you said, one of the things was the ability to have the Navy help pay for college, and at this point you're going to Rhode Island College, and was it for music purposes?
It was for music purposes. Initially, I thought I was going to be a bit involved in political science.
Wow, there's a big difference between.
Oh gosh, yes, and it was only at a certain point. I ended up actually winning an internship at Washington D.C. for about 3 weeks.
No kidding.
Because I was one of the students picked of 4 in my political science class.
So you really were going down that avenue.
I was heading down that way, but once I got to Washington, I realized how treacherous it was.
Oh, man.
So I backed off, and that's where the music really took hold.
Now, at this point at Rhode Island College, had you not decided on a major yet?
Hadn't decided.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what kind of music, in colleges in general, but also in Rhode Island College, what specifically do you do as far as a major for music goes? Is it so that you can learn to teach it, or how does that work?
Performing and teaching.
Okay.
You learn how to perform different levels of music. You, if interested, would probably end up trying to play a number of different instruments. I still feel that much more could have been done at the undergraduate level for folks who were going to be performers or who were going to go out and actually teach. There's only so much time, you know what I mean? So I think it took me pretty much 18 years to get to where I could manage pretty much the majority of the instruments used by students.
Now, when you go in and try to get a music degree, is it based on the assumption that you already know how to read music and play, or is that something that someone can, do they teach you there in college, or how does that work?
If you come into college without certain skills, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Probably not a good idea for you to go into that major in the first place, right?
The expectation is that you would probably know something about music theory.
Right.
The language of music, that you would have at least specific skills on an instrument, if not more than one, and definitely knowing how to read music, definitely knowing how to perform, you know.
It's interesting to hear about all some of the great musicians that exist today in popular music and otherwise that actually don't know how to read music, but they just picked up an instrument and learned how to play and ended up making a lot of money too.
And a lot of people can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a natural talent. But in order to put that music on paper, you know, I would probably, let's say, for example, if I had what we call having big ears, I can hear things, I can see things in my head, but if I don't know how to locate that,
how do you translate it?
Well, I come and I get you, for example, if you are an arranger, you know, someone that knows how to write music, then I hire you.
And that's where all these careers in music come into play. Because I was going to ask you, because you had said you really think that they could do more in the undergraduate area in colleges for performers. But when you major in music, what kind of careers do you go into with that degree afterwards? Like besides teaching, because I know that would be one.
You could be a performer if you take composition and arranging. You can actually make money writing music for other people. Matter of fact, if you were to look at the label for a lot of the music that you see today, you'll see maybe other names listed. Now, if let's say you were the guy that came up with the idea, but you don't know how to read music, your name might be listed first, and then those other people,
the arrangers,
slash, you know,
Right, that's interesting. All right, so let's hop back on the timeline. So you're in Rhode Island College. What happens next?
Well, I went through Rhode Island College.
You like that school, by the way? Is it a good school?
Well, I wasn't. I do.
Okay.
I did not want to. You know, once I graduated from that school, it wasn't the school that I wanted to go back to work on master's credits.
Right. Especially since you started doing political stuff. You know, originally.
Well, but it wasn't. I wasn't politically involved to the point where there would have been anything to have created a problem for me. It's just that. I think once you've been exposed to certain professors, I think it's a good idea to try something different.
Second opinion?
So that you can hear a different thing
That's
come
a good
at
point,
you.
yeah.
So I got involved after that into visiting other universities and colleges and getting information from those professors about different things. Plus the fact, too, there were some things that I knew I needed, which was I needed repair skills. I needed to know how to take an instrument, take it apart, repair it. Suppose I was on a concert and something happened to a pad. How do I fix that?
Right. It's one thing to be able to play it, but what do you do if it breaks?
If it breaks, yes.
Now, once you get established enough as an artist, as a musician, normally you would have somebody on your staff or in your group that would specifically be designed to take care of the repair of instruments, right?
Not really.
You really have to be up there in the big time, I guess, for that. If you're out on the road, if you're on tour, you've got a crew. Yeah.
But if you're in a public school system, 9 times out of 10, you're at the mercy of the local music stores.
Exactly right. Yeah, and you know, whatever they're charging for repair.
Absolutely.
All right. So, if you've decided to go get your master's, was there something in order for you to do that? Or to want to do that, was there really something specific in mind that you had goal-wise as far as music career? Because like you said, there were some things that you hadn't, that you wanted to pick up on, like for example, repair, but that's just one example.
Well, what I found when I was looking at catalogs for much of the course structure, if you were going for your master's, many of the things they weren't going to do me that much good.
For master's degree.
Yes.
Yeah.
In other words, the information would be good. I'd be learning about one thing or the other, but having to do with repair skills, that wasn't a part of it.
Yeah.
High school band directors like myself, we needed skills for marching bands. A lot of that wasn't involved. So what I tried to do was shape my own program. And attending these other universities allowed me to do that. And I could do that during the summer. And that was not only far more interesting, but far more functional.
Yeah, and far more advantageous for you for what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's also very interesting that you had a very, now, you know, as we sit here and talk to you, we begin to learn that you had a very, you're really starting to come together with your idea about what you wanted to do. I don't know if it was all there yet, but it sort of began to culminate into this idea of maybe teaching music, you know, especially with young people, and also the ability to be able to provide for them in some ways, especially if they were in a, you know, they were disadvantaged as far as finances and things of that sort. So this is a good place to kind of continue on in that timeline. You decided to visit all these other universities, picked up some skills and some ideas, and at this point, it's really molding you to what you're going to end up doing.
It was helping me because as a band director, one thing that I wasn't quite sure of was what kind of band director I could be.
Right.
You know,
because you can go in different directions there too.
Well, there are some band directors that are over the top, and what I mean by that is, you know, we're involved in festivals. We're involved in touring to Bermuda, for example, on Royal Caribbean cruise ship. These are things that I eventually got to do,
right,
because at a certain point, you don't take a concert band on tour or into competitions unless they are prepared. And if you're not prepared as a person who can, for example, my bassoon player needs a fingering for a B flat, I've got to be able to show him that. Or my oboe player or whatever. If I can't show them how to fix certain problems, then I can't take my group into a competition because there'll be problems there that were not fixed beforehand.
Let's talk about your group or a group for a second, because I want to, this is kind of going off on the side a little bit. What goes into deciding who should be in your band if you've decided in your mind you want to put one together for the kind of music that you want to do for yourself, for you and your kind of music and the band that you want to put together. But you know, this, I would imagine some of the same, you know, criteria would go into just a regular music, popular music band too. But more specifically for you, like what would you look for, and how do you do the audition process? And is it more on feel and gut instinct? Obviously they're playing, but talk about that a little bit.
This would relate to the popular band that well, everyone in the band that I have right now was actually handpicked. And
by you?
By me. And I'm happy to say that the collection of players that I have, we've been together well around 30 years.
No kidding. Yeah. Wow.
And these are people who are graduates of the Berklee School of Music.
Impressive.
They're all readers.
And writers, readers, yeah.
As a matter of fact, one of my players at this time, my guitarist, is still teaching at the Berklee School of Music in Boston.
Impressive.
So if you get the right mixture of players together, basically I think a lot of the egos go out the window because everyone understands what the other is doing.
And it becomes a passion. You're like, you feed off of each other's positive energy.
And I think
you're not trying to one-up each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
and also, because you all can read and write and compose and arrange the music, there's not all those extra names on there. It's just you guys because you do. And I assume it's all original music, or do you do covers?
Well, we do covers.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been a while since I think any of us really tried to jot out any. Well, we do have a few original things. As a matter of fact, the young lady in our group, Kelly Lennon, there's a few arrangements that were done for her by our guitarist. Very, very nice arrangements because he's got such a great ear and playing skills. So there are some things that we do, but they are arrangements of established pieces.
Right. Yeah. But also, but kind of has your style on it. You kind of put your style on it.
Touch.
You know, we're going to do this at the end of the show too, but while we're like sort of in the middle, more than halfway, you got a website people can go to and learn more and hear your music and maybe see your music and stuff like that?
Malloi, that's M-A-L-L-O-I, not a Y, but I.com.
All right, and they can go there and find everything. They can hear your music, see your music.
Hear the music. They'll see pictures of us there. You will actually have, there's a calendar that lets people know, you know, where we're performing. Yeah.
Now, I would, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you playing in a band, having your own band, that's sort of your passion. But at the same time, it's not really another life, but it's another aspect of music. You being, you know, you teaching music and being, you know, like the leader of a band, you know, a marching band, so to speak, and school kids. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, you may not know about this, but Jay Leno, some years ago, Jay Leno cracked a joke on his television show about Fall River and Central Falls.
Well, isn't he from that area, or Boston, Providence, something like that?
I think maybe he may be from the Boston area. I'm not sure, but he made a crack on Pawtucket and Fall River, and the fact that Central Falls, and the fact that they could not put together even a marching band because everything was so bad and lousy.
Wow.
So a friend of mine, his name is Doug, who used to work for a music store in Seekonk. He and I decided to get together and put together a marching band.
On purpose, because of what you heard, or were you going to do it anyway?
No, we did this because of him.
Okay.
And then once we established the group, we got in touch with Jay Leno and told him that there is a band in Central Falls, Pawtucket. If he didn't believe it, he could bring us on and we'd give a performance.
Nice.
Of course, he never did.
Did you ever hear back from his staff or anything?
Nothing that I can point my finger to.
Okay.
But I'd say within about 3 years or so, we had gone from about 28 students to nearly 200.
Wow.
We were able to mobilize all of the local high school bands And they would all come. We would do the July 4th parade, which we did for a number of years. You would see banners from any number of high schools, and you have them all lined up. We literally covered almost a block and a half.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Now, to this day, do you still do festivals? I know you're not out on the cruise ships too much, but I mean, whenever an opportunity presents itself locally, will you guys try to get out and do something?
Well, I'm retired now.
Okay, but that doesn't, retired,
Yeah.
you know, that's such a subjective term.
Well,
you know
the
what I
only
mean?
reason I say that is because the last time I took a group to Bermuda, I took about 84 students into competition.
Wow.
And it was a great, great competition. We got a superior rating. It was just a phenomenal trip for us. But being out of the schools, I don't have that. I'm not able to get my hand on those kids.
Right, you're not quite as plugged in
No.
in the ability.
But I assist.
Yep.
I still sub if someone needs my help. I also take students that they recommend for private tutoring, and those types of things I do. Yeah.
What is the state of music instruction in the school system these days? Is it one of those things that has a tendency to get, you know, cut budget-wise because it's not, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic kind of basic stuff?
I think the administrators approach music the wrong way. And what I mean by that is there's an assumption that it siphons off an enormous amount of the funds that the school might want for line items for other things. My suggestion would be to have the administrators sit down with music people, maybe even college professors, and talk about such things as scholarships that are available to good musicians. I know what I used to do with, because I used to participate in practicum programs, I'd have new teachers come to see me, and I would try to design for them different ways to raise funds for their program. In other words, don't rely on the school. Try to figure a way to maybe get on the staff at Gillette Stadium, for example, work in one of their concessions, because the Gillette Stadium doesn't have, they don't have people that they hire to work those week after week. They farm those out to nonprofit groups.
Right, it's all volunteers.
It's all volunteer.
Yeah.
They pay you.
Right, right.
But you bring in a group to work their stands and kiosks and various things. So I would talk about how to get Walmart to participate, how to get maybe Lowe's to participate, how to get Home Depot to participate, get a lot of the local businesses to help you raise funds, you know, when you're trying to put funds together. Because once the school feels, not that it's particularly true, but once the school begins to feel that your band is siphoning off an enormous amount of funding, you become easy to cut.
Yeah.
They won't cut the sports program.
Because that generates revenue for them?
That generates revenue that they can see.
Right.
You see? And you've got this big, once they build the football field and the tennis courts and everything else, you're not going to tear those things down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So that kind of segues into what we were talking about earlier, and the disadvantages of, you know, maybe some financially distressed families where they might be interested in music but can't afford the instruments or maybe can't afford the lessons, and you've been able to step in certain ways there and help out. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, one of the things I do, we play for a number of different fundraisers during the year, and what I offer the fundraisers, basically we donate an instrument, and it's usually new. We donate an instrument to the fundraiser, and we also say that whoever bids for this and wins it will also get 2 or 3 private lessons to get them started on that instrument. I've gone to the various middle schools and high schools to let people know that I have a number of instruments available. If it's been donated to me, I'll rehab it and make it available free to the students. If I end up having to put a couple of dollars into it, I can show them where this is what I've done, I'm only getting this back. So that's how I pretty much operate.
Can people go to your website even now, the one that you just mentioned, and be able to kind of learn more about that?
They would have to call me.
Okay.
Yeah, they would have to call me to do that, because I don't, it's not something that I've really listed on the website as a kind of business. It's mostly by word of mouth.
Right.
Those people who know me tell
Okay.
other people, and they come to see me, and there we go.
Before we run out of time, I want to ask you a question about, this is a question about culture. Like, for example, where I live, and I do some sports stuff for UConn football, so I'm a stringer. for Fox Sports Radio. So at the end of the game, obviously the band will come out, and a lot of times, depending on where you're at, the majority of the fans, when the game is over, they take off. And a lot of times you'll see a fantastic band performing down on field, and there's not a lot of people waiting there. There are your fans of the band, and they do a great job. But the culture in some parts of the country, like maybe down south, the band is a bigger deal than even the football team or the team that's on the field, and it's heavy-duty competition.
UMass Amherst.
UMass Amherst.
At the end of their football game, no one leaves.
Everybody stays.
They give a concert. As a matter of fact, when I was teaching in Seekonk, at the end of our game, we would give a concert.
That's got to make you, as a person, as a music lover, as a band lover, and a brass lover, that's got to make you feel good.
It gives you chills.
I got to ask you one more question before we go. Your thoughts on music today in the sense of how technology has changed, like the delivery system of music. Like, you don't play, back when you were listening to jazz, back when you were a kid, you were playing records. Now they go on iTunes and listen to it, and it's all downloaded, and there's no records, there's not even CDs anymore. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
iPods and everything.
I think it's getting tougher and tougher for live musicians or live bands to keep up with the amount of music coming out. You may know this, but it seems that Maroon 5 will have a record that they'll distribute this week. Well, within another week or two, they've got another one.
Right.
So all the different Bruno Mars and all these folks, there's so much music coming out so fast that groups like ours, whatever we put together maybe even 3 to 4 weeks ago, is now old already.
Right.
So I'm not sure where things are going. I do know that there are a lot of artists out there, some of them very good, and then there's some others that obviously things are being electronically adjusted to make it sound good. Plus the fact too, you've got the thing of how much skin are you willing to expose?
Yeah, right.
So there's just so much going on.
I'm going to assume you're not a fan of auto-tune, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Gaston Malloy, pleasure having you on the show today. We learned a lot, and hopefully you'll come back soon and talk to us some more, okay?
Well, I hope so.
All right.
I hope so.
Thank you so much. That is our show for today. Thank you for joining us. You can see this show and many others on our YouTube site. In the meantime, I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record, and we will see you next time. Take care.